Hi everyone, I'm Any New Province, and this week we're playing Devious Control for Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefits of net decking in Pauper. We have definitely seen blue-red control lists be popular in the past, especially around the Peregrine Drake era. However, the printing of Hypothesizzle and Devious cover-up in Guilds of Ravnica has given players another reason to revisit the archetype. This week we're playing a build of Izzet Control called Devious Control that Entropy 263 took to a top 8 finish in a recent Pauper challenge. Before I get into the deck tech, I just want to let you know that you can like the video and subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know that you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Alright, let's get into Devious Control. So first I'm going to go over the cards that were printed in Guilds of Ravnica that make this deck list so interesting. First we have Hypothesizzle, which costs 3 blue-red for an instant that allows you to draw 2 cards, then you may discard a non-land card. When you do, Hypothesizzle deals 4 damage to target creature. This card is insane. It just does so much stuff. It's awesome card filtering. Maybe you can take advantage of the non-land card you discard to it, and you'll deal damage to your opponent's creature, hopefully killing it. It just does everything. We also have 2 Devious cover-up alongside a lot of other counter magic, but this one is definitely unique. It costs 2 blue for an instant that counters target spell. If that spell was countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. That's pretty sweet as it is. After that, you may shuffle up to 4 target cards from your graveyard into your library. If you've ever played Izzet Control decks, you know that decking out is actually a legitimate concern. Devious cover-up is a tool that these ultra slow decks can use to make sure that they don't lose the game in that way. Also, with all of the cantrips and card filtering we're playing, it's not unlikely that we'll get down to few cards in our library by the end of the game, meaning that we can just stack it however we want with Devious cover-up so that we draw into more burn or more counter spells or whatever we need in any given situation. The rest of our counter magic package starts off with Exclude. It costs 2 blue mana for an instant that counters target creature spell and lets you draw a card. The fact that Exclude replaces itself in your hand is amazing, and if you hold out to hit just the right threat with it, it can completely turn the tide of a game. Now, we definitely could not have a counter spell package without the OG counter spell. It costs blue, it's an instant, it counters target spell. Because this deck is trying to play such a long game, it can't 1-for-1 with its opponent very often, so we have a ton of card advantage to make sure our grip is always more full than the one across the table. First we have Augur of Bolas. It costs 1 and a blue for a 1/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal an instant or sorcery card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Augur of Bolas may very well be the most powerful piece of card advantage in the entire Pauper format. It's not hard to build around it so that you have enough hits in your deck that you're always drawing a card with Augur of Bolas, but it's also a 1/3. It gets in the way of any of those red deck wins creatures or a few random stompy creatures without rankers on them. We're also running Archaeomancer, which is a little bit clunkier than Augur of Bolas when you're trying to get an instant or sorcery spell into your hand, but it gives you a lot more selection. Archaeomancer costs 2 blue for a 1/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Next up, we have Think Twice, which costs 1 and a blue for an instant that draws you a card. The reason this is actually card advantage is because of its flashback ability. You can pay 2 and a blue, exile Think Twice from your graveyard, and draw another card. Because one of the goals of this deck is legitimately to get to the bottom of its library so that Devious cover-up gets better, we're running a copy of Una's Grace to help us out if we're flooding. Una's Grace costs 2 and a blue for an instant that causes target player to draw a card. I don't know, maybe sometimes it'll be our opponent if we're on the mill plan. The reason Una's Grace is better than a normal cantrip is that it has Retrace, which means you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. We're also running the very contentious Brainstorm, an incredibly powerful card but a difficult one to make work in Pauper. Brainstorm costs 1 blue mana for an instant that allows you to draw 3 cards, which is awesome, but then you have to put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. The reason Brainstorm is so contentious is because in most formats, you'll put 2 cards from your hand back on top of your library that you don't want anymore, and then crack a fetch land so that you shuffle them away. In our deck, it's a little bit more clunky. We have kind of bad fetch lands, and we can use Augur of Bolas, but still Brainstorm, very powerful cantrip. Finally, geez, it feels like most of this deck is just card filtering, and our final card filtering spell is Preordain. It costs 1 blue mana for a sorcery that allows you to scry 2, then draw a card. Next, I'm going to talk about the reason this deck is actually playing red, and that's for some of the very powerful and efficient interaction that red brings to the control table. First, we have Firebolt, which costs 1 red mana for a sorcery that deals 2 damage to any target, which is like worse than Shock, right? But you can flashback Firebolt from your graveyard by paying 4 and a red and exiling it. We've also got 4 copies of Flame Slash to deal with creatures that maybe Firebolt can't handle. It costs 1 red mana for a sorcery that deals 4 damage to target creature. Finally, we have 2 copies of Lightning Bolt, which it may not seem like it just by looking at the deck list, but I think this might actually be our win condition. Lightning Bolt costs 1 red mana for an instant and deals 3 damage to any target. Hopefully we'll be dealing 3 damage a bunch of times with a single Lightning Bolt. Our deck is going to be super slow with all of its counter magic and interaction, so Entropy 263 included some spells that are ultra powerful in a late game like that. First, we have the infamous Ghostly Flicker. It costs 2 and a blue for an instant, and it exiles 2 artifacts, creatures, and or lands you control, then returns those cards to the battlefield under your control. Ghostly Flicker seems kind of innocuous, but in Pauper, we're always using it to create flicker loops with Archaeomancer. Basically, if one of the things that you return to the battlefield with Ghostly Flicker is Archaeomancer, you get the Ghostly Flicker back, you trigger some other enters the battlefield ability, and if you have 2 Archaeomancers, you can just keep getting other instants and sorceries back out of your graveyard. It's pretty crazy to see happen. We're also playing Capsize, which is an absolute beating against things like Gurmag Angler and Karoo lands. It costs 1 blue for an instant with buyback 2, which means you can pay an extra 2 generic mana as you're casting Capsize to return it to your hand when it resolves. What it does is returns target permanent to its owner's hand. All right, let's have a look at this mana base. First, we have our non-basics, 3 copies of Ash Barrens and 2 copies of Evolving Wilds, fetches so that we can reset the top of our library after we use a Brainstorm, but also just something to get some basic lands out of our library to fix our mana. We have 4 copies of Is It Boilerworks, probably because we're cheating on mana a little bit. We've only got 22 lands, and these kind of represent 2 land drops, and we're also running 4 copies of Swiftwater Cliffs, a little bit of main deck life gain, but also just really good mana fixing in the early game. For basics, we're running 9 islands and only a single basic mountain, probably for fetching out with our Ash Barrens and Evolving Wilds when we need an untapped red source. We've got all of those islands to get our Xeroxing going right away with a Preordain on turn 1. All right, let's have a look at this sideboard, and it looks like a powerful one. This is a big draw to playing blue and red. First, we have 3 copies of Hydroblast for countering all of those red spells or destroying those red permanents, 2 copies of Electrickery for wrathing X1s, 2 copies of Gorilla Shamans for wrathing artifacts, 2 copies of Relic of Progenitus so that we can fight other slow decks by controlling their graveyard, 4 copies of Pyroblast for fighting all of those blue decks, and 2 copies of Serrated Arrows for picking Tireless Tribes and Fairies out of the sky. And there you have it, Devious Control by Entropy 263. Congratulations again on your finish, Entropy. Normally at this part, I'd say that we're going to take this deck into a league on a Monday night, but we're actually switching the schedule so that Net Benefits is on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Atlantic time now. So we'll be taking this deck live into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time. We're going to be there every Wednesday night playing competitive Pauper decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Wednesday nights.